Thanks.
Well, hello there in Who Knew Land. This is Tom Truitt bringing you our third installment of The Smartest People in the Room. And today, as you can tell, I'm broadcasting my part from Tennessee Brew Works, which is one of my favorite watering holes here in Nashville, Tennessee.
It looks like a halo over your head, Tom.
Need our support. It's a guitar pick. That logo is a guitar pick. I'll get out of the way so you can kind of see it. But,
I see. Now I get it. It's a guitar pick.
Yes. Little history about this business that I'm so fond of. It's run by a fellow Tar Heel. Many of my friends know how passionate I am about the North Carolina Tar Heels. Christian Spears runs this place, and he was an investment banker in New York for many years, made a lot of money, got burned out, and decided he wanted to make beer. And so he moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and opened Tennessee Brew Works, and it continues to be a terrific place for a meal and a cold beer to go during these COVID times. They've got curb service. Check them out, folks.
Tom, I have a theory.
What's that?
If North Carolina had a basketball team worth a hoot, I think we'd hear about them more often. I went to school in Kentucky. You can see Kentucky blue on me, buddy.
I'm getting ready to mute you.
If only your team had a basketball team there in North Carolina, I believe we'd hear more about you.
Hey, I call this the event The Smartest People in the Room, and now you're demonstrating that you don't belong.
Tom, I'm from Kentucky, the land of basketball. For God's sakes, Tom.
Well, listen, these people did not tune in to hear you and I debate which program is superior, because they know the answer to that, the Heels, and they actually came to listen to you talk to Brian Zisk. So let me kick off the proceedings real quickly by thanking some of our sponsors, because without them, we couldn't do what we do. Our sponsors are First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, which is the search firm that I work for, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, Core Power Yoga, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, which is where I am right now, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Also Organics.
Hey, you got to get you some of that. That Also Organic stuff came to my house.
Oh, yeah?
Way to go. That's some fine stuff there, Tom.
Well, that is fine stuff. It's high-end CBD product, and I am delighted to turn all of our audience onto it. It's a fantastic company run by another fantastic entrepreneur named Chewy Smith. Chewy's claim to fame is he started CID Entertainment, which does all the backstage VIP experiences at festivals. More on that later. Ladies and gentlemen, today it is my pleasure to include you all in the room with two of the smartest people I know, Mr. Brian Zisk and Mr. Jim Griffin. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about these two geniuses. Jim almost needs no intro because my audience is very familiar with him. Jim is an expert media technologist and well-schooled and experienced in the ways of digital media and its monetization, especially music and the text, graphics, and video that accompany it. He's the founder and moderator of the FA List, which for 15 years has been amongst the best global communities for digital music and media. And it's also a list that includes many of the industry's smartest people. Our very special guest today is a close friend of mine, Mr. Brian Zisk. Brian Zisk is a parallel entrepreneur who helps change how people view industries. He is fascinated by and explores where industries converge around music, technology, money, technology, health and technology, real estate and technology, and so many more. As you can tell, technology is in his DNA. He has been at the center of the Bay Area technology ecosystem for decades and also left his heart in New York, Maui, New Orleans, and Miami. Brian published San Francisco and the second event newsletter on the web. He co-founded the pioneering open source streaming Greenwich Internet Radio, the Future of Music Coalition, the San Francisco and Maui in-person music tech summits, and the Future of Money summits. And he's now blazing a trail through online events and digital exchanges of value. Brian explores human and outdoor nature and attempts to aid the communication and understanding through advocacy for everyone in the ecosystem who treat each other with compassion. And folks, given all the shit going on in our world right now, is there a better topic than to talk about than compassion? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Griffin and Brian Zisk to the smartest people in the room.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and especially with Brian. And there's no place better to start with Brian than conferences. And I say that because you've probably met him at a conference, and he was probably running the conference. And so you didn't have enough time to get to know him, but you know him through his conferences. And so, Brian, I'm going to start there, wind you up, and get you to talking about the conferences you put on, the conferences you'd like to put on, and basically what you know about the world of conferences. And I'm going to mention that I heard you the other day talk about what you are calling the demise of South by Southwest. And I'm not asking you to pile on to other people's misery, but it is to say that the conference business is not static today. It is not what we know it to be. It's changing dramatically. So give us your POV on conferences, your own and others.
Okay, well, to get there, I think I have to go a little bit to an overarching overview, which is that everything has changed. Right now, everything has changed. We come from a music industry where 90% of the folks around live shows are out of business for the foreseeable future, where bands who had 100 gigs lined up have 0 gigs lined up, and everything is changing. So what do I think about? Like, got a little weirded out by the smartest people in the room topic, because the reality is, I search for the smartest people, and I want to get to know them, and I bring them together around conferences, because what is a conference? It's getting the most interesting people together to try to move the viewpoints forward, getting the diversity of views and the diversity of people. And the bad conferences are the ones where everyone agrees, and the good conferences are the ones where we're trying to figure it all out. And people talk about inventing the future. And it's funny because we're 20 years into this now, Jim, if not more. And how do you invent the future? There's an amazing Alan Kay interview with Y Combinator about how to, how to invent the future. Look for what you know is going to happen in 20 years and start working on it now. And you'll be 10 years ahead. And if you have a forum like the Faux List or San Francisco or the SF Music Tech Summits, by bringing together the people who are exploring all the new ways, you have the more established folks, you have the young guns. This is what moves society forward. So we're almost limited by the term conference, because it's how do we mix everybody up together? You know, whether it's like a Grateful Dead show or a George Clinton show, or how do you get people to be like, this is greater than what we had, like what happened with the Faux List. So conferences were the physical manifestation that would pull people all together into the same place at the same time. And whether it was like our Future of Music Policy Summits, or whether it's a Who Knew event, or whether it's a SF Music Tech Summit, it brings people together. And now we can't gather in person like that. So we have to gather online. So what are the situations that are going to let everybody interact more? And I could talk about this all day. I spoke about it with Tom. I spoke about it with Jim. You know, this is a webinar. This is 3 of us. It's great. It's great if there's 1,000 of us and we can all scroll through. There's a lot of interfaces that are evolving. So as we switch to not being able to, you know, if I'm in person and I want to sell a $10,000 sponsorship and I can throw parties and this and that, it's one thing. Now that we're online, revenue has dropped 85%. It's much harder for people to justify, and God bless sponsors. God bless Tom's sponsors. I want to try them all out. God bless the people who support these structures that allow us to build community. But we're dealing with a situation like we were ready to have our big, you know, we were going to have NOLA Music Tech in New Orleans during Jazz Fest. I would have pitied any of you who didn't make it because it was going to be more fun than you could have imagined. That said, we can't do that. We can't do our big 20th SF Music Tech in San Francisco in the fall. And anything, and I don't want to single out anyone, and maybe I'll single out Coachella, because I think AEG is uniquely suited to figuring out how to get the people who want to see shows connected with the people who are doing shows. But if you have something where you're supposed to work on it with a team of 100 people for 8 months, when you know the odds are that it's not going to be able to happen, you take this risky business of putting on conferences or concerts, which we joke, it's like, do we make minimum wage on our shows? Many good things happen, but economically, if all of a sudden you're like, we're going to have to, it always used to be an earthquake or a fire could put you out of business. But now that there's at least a 50% chance that whatever you schedule and work towards may have to go online where the economics are different, I mean, we will forever miss the getting together like we did. And to some extent, it will come back. To other extents, some of my friends who are getting on in age or who may have immune issues may never go out in public again. I may never see my mom again, is a horrible reality. She's got some immune issues and, and so how do we connect everybody online in these new structures, and this goes on almost to the next thing, which is there's so much good stuff out there. How do you compete with free? And this comes back to the whole music industry and the whole entertainment industry, because there used to be all these strictures around access. And it used to be, if you wanted to be in the room at SF Music Tech, you better get to San Francisco and you better buy your ticket and da-da-da-da-da. Now it's like, we are all seeing 5, 6 good Zooms a day where you can get a free education. I mean, stuff's changing. Like, you're going to have Google partnered with Stanford. She can come in. I think things are changing more rapidly than any of us are counting on. And those who bet long, those who bet on the change, are going to do a lot better than folks who are like, we have our existing business models. How do we prevent them from changing? So conferences that change will thrive, but I, as a conference producer, am not and would not bet on a physical event in the next 6 to 18 months. There will be things where people go, okay, like people are getting out Friday, I'm going to throw a party on Saturday. Boom, I only spend a week on it. I can make some revenue. It's fine. But gone are the days where we're going to get Jimmy Page and the reformed Beatles and 100,000 people in the desert and generate huge amounts of money. Things have just changed.
So what do you do if you're South by Southwest and you're an aircraft carrier, for goodness sakes? I mean, how do you move that? How do you repurpose it? What happens if you're in charge of South by Southwest? What would you be doing now? I mean, you're talking about the 100 people working for 12 months to put on a show. You're defining South by Southwest.
Well, I mean, this is just pure me speculating, and the reality
Fair
is,
enough. That's
what is South by Southwest? And is it the people who own it, or is it the spirit behind it? And it may be crash it into the reef and reboot it in 2 years. I mean, sometimes bad things happen to good businesses. And that's, and God bless that there's still people that are working to transition it to digital. There's incredible people available. I mean, you look at our conferences, we hired Melissa O'Brien, we hired Bobby Knoll, we hired Tyler Williams. Like, anybody who really wants to scale now, there are great people dispersed, in New Zealand after 15 years at South by. It's different, and it's just the table got thrown up in the air, and it's time for us all to reassemble it in whatever new model is going to come together, because the old model is not, I mean, and yes, it may all come back, and we may in a year forget about the pandemic, and we may, but things are different, and you have to adapt, and you have to really look at where you believe things are going to be. And I wouldn't bet against us all living in pods being dripped food and entertainment. I mean, if the economics where the automation shows that we have plenty, that there's an economy of abundance. I mean, we've been all about competition and like fighting and the government issues. This is back to the future of money stuff and the money creation. You know, if the government issues 10 and we have to return to society 11, and then we all fight over who loses, is a very different situation than if there's enough resources for everybody, or there's distribution. And I get that, you know, like people, they make their money, they should be able to keep it. But the reality also is that if we as a society don't take care of everybody, you know, I mean, we can take care of everybody. So how do we get there? Through abundance. If I do a newsletter and 10 people read it, big deal. And 1,000 people read it, there's more value. And 1 million people read it, there's tons of value. Same with music. And yes, there needs to be compensation. But the reality is that if one person hears a song, there's some value. And if 100 million people hear the song and it becomes an anthem for the day, and maybe you don't capture, in fact, you don't capture value from every use, but if you're the song of this summer, you're set for life. So how can we find these ways to increase abundance and have a basic safety net and really go forward with society from there?
Look, one of the reasons I envy you is that you're an active investor. Now, whenever I get an extra dollar, I drop it into Berkshire Hathaway and sit on it. And I get to read the annual report once a year and follow the wisdom of Warren Buffett.
Sure.
But you're an active investor. You're one who's watched companies rise, fall. You've seen successes, you've seen failures, you've lived with success and failure. And so that's why I want to go there now with you, to let the audience gain some of the perspective you've gotten over the years by putting your hard-earned dollars into new companies, old companies, etc.
Sure.
And learn the lessons from getting your ass kicked every now and then. I mean,
sure.
They say in rural Virginia, where I come from, that the second kick of the mule doesn't really deliver the education of the first. But I'll bet you've had the first kick, the second kick, and the third kick. So
sure.
I want you to share with the crowd what you've learned through all this investing.
Well, I've learned a lot by being a bad investor. And now I'm actually a better investor, who I want to be careful around the term active, because how shall I put it? I'm seeing like active in startups. It's a good year for startups because things are bad. This is like you can hire people. This is where the Googles and the Airbnbs and all that will start. That said, some of the other opportunities now are hard to ignore. I've been a huge Tesla fan. I've been a huge Zoom fan. I'm hoping Tesla goes down so I can get more leverage. When you're dealing with the sort of opportunities in a lot of these, I'm a very buy and hold investor. Like you were talking about Berkshire Hathaway. It's like Zoom until why not? Tesla until why not? Etsy and Netflix. Now the smaller folks, and I'm not with a fund right now, I'm between funds and negotiating with funds. That said, the companies that I've invested in that are doing best now are the ones where, hey Mark, where demand is 10xing.
Mark Kate in the house.
You have situations where, you know, and yes, the recorded music industry may go up 10% a year. And Zoom and video is 10xing. Something like Maestro, which people use to distribute video, through the roof. Museo, a great CEO with AI that helps people tame their multi-million song catalogs, through the roof, right? rock bottom, especially once they get back to people going out again. It's like, it's very hard to look at startups. I want to be careful because people are like, he's an investor. And I'm like, at this point, do you have a bunch of revenue? Is it growing substantially quickly? Is it like, are you one of the great CEOs? Okay, then maybe there's something to talk about, but you really need to be on the path where things are going. Like I learned, I invested in a number of streaming companies that I lost money on. I was way too far ahead. I didn't do my research. The one guy, it's time to switch to EDM. He's like, jazz forever. You know, I mean, you learn all these things and you learn how not to make the same mistakes. And you learn about the things you missed out on. I should have invested in the seed round of Zoom. I should have invested in the seed round of TransferWise.
You should have bought more Bitcoin.
Travis was running around from the faux list trying to raise money on a 6 million valuation for Uber, you know? And you're like, and you go, you know, do I want to be married to this guy for the next 20 years? And in retrospect, yes. It would be good to have $1 billion.
You know, it's funny you say that because I used to write about horse racing in my youth, and I would tell people that it's better to bet on jockeys than it is on horses, you know?
It is.
And I want to turn to Tom Truitt for a second because, Tom, you're a man who works with jockeys of companies. You're a headhunter. Do you have anything to contribute to us talking about these companies and the people who run them?
Well, Brian's right. You pick talented people and you bet on them. Their business models may or may not be great, but if they're smart enough, eventually they're going to figure it out. And so I have the pleasure of placing really smart people into great jobs from time to time. You
got any big jobs coming up, going on now?
Well, listen, I don't want the light on me. I want it on him. But yeah, I am working on a big search for SoundCloud right now. And I'm also working on a cool one for the Blues Foundation.
The Blues Foundation?
I'm looking for the newest CEO of the Blues Foundation in Memphis, Tennessee.
Got to move to Memphis, you're saying?
Yeah, but the SoundCloud job is a ginormous global level job.
Well,
Very
fascinating.
excited about that one.
Thanks for tossing that in here. Look, Brian, we don't have that much longer. It seems like these things fly like crazy. And I want to get at your arc. You know, it's about a 30-year arc that I've known you. And I want to follow that, and I'd like you to expound upon it. The arc that you've been on and where you see it going. You know, where does that arc bend? And tell me, especially with regards to digital services. So take it away. Tell us what you've seen, where you see it going.
I don't know what I've seen. You know, I used to travel around as a vendor on Grateful Dead tour, and then I got tired of having too much stuff. So I said, this is all going to go digital.
Too much stuff?
Too much stuff.
Selling goods.
I wanted digital. I'm going to move to San Francisco. I'm going to get some software or write it, and I'm going to press floppies, and I'm going to send it to people because on-demand distribution is the key to the future. And I came out to San Francisco, and I'm like, how do I connect with people? And the Well had popped up, which was all the cool reporters and all the cool people.
So you brought your modem with you. Was it 2400 baud?
You had to have two modems. I think it was 14.4, and you'd buy one for the ISP and one for us. And that was the first ISP, and you just do it. And then I joined BMUG, which was the Macintosh user group where there's hardware, but then you support it. And I went in, and they were basically like, here's the tools for opening it up. Just fix them. And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, here's how you do it. Now you know. And it became a real break it until it's working. And there was a real ethos back in the day of like, what has no one ever done and how can we do it?
There you are. You're back.
Hello?
Gotcha.
Got
Go
me.
for it. Keep going.
So, you know, and then when we did San Francisco, it was like, that was back in the day, and you remember it, there would be a site on the web that would list all the new websites of the day. and you could really connect with the people who are the real leaders. And the folks who were the head of the time back then are still ahead of the time now. You popped up, Jim, back in like 93, you know, like.
Yeah, but I remember nothing that happened in San Francisco. Not a thing about it do I remember. So
I remember too much.
And so I turned to you to remind me of the things that happened then.
So then, you know, when we came up and we were back in the time in Napster and everyone was like, you know, we were like free music, no ads. And everyone was like thief. And we're like, wait a minute, we're fully licensed and buying $500,000 worth of CDs and paying for this new distribution method, which is 100% legal. Why can't we have a discussion around the fact that petrochemical discs are no longer going to be the dominant method of distributing music? And how can we find ways to build a just and equitable distribution system when the reality is they're just digital bits and people can have access to them? So this goes back to you were simultaneously going on about the celestial jukebox and how it's really about how can we get access to this information. It's like not that how can we get it for free or how can people disrespect, you know, people's desires, but the reality is in this world where information flows, how can we capture the value and increase the value? And yes, I get that, you know, if you feel the need to limit the distribution to have a better point on the demand curve, we understand that. But to lose out on, you know, people talk about who the creators are. And right now there's an incredible new class of creators. There's so many people on TikTok or whatever, what my daughters are doing online. I mean, we caught my 7-year-old daughter was broadcasting and it was like, what, you know? And it's like, it's a very different time. So as we've moved to where 20 years ago, it was obvious that now people would have these computers in their pockets that are both clients and servers, and we're all sharing. We were right about some things, we were wrong about some things. We were very wrong about whether it would be open and people would all have their sites and everything would be distributed, or if it would be more centralized through something like Facebook. And we end up in a situation where most people are centralized through Facebook. And I'm all for open, but it becomes a balance. And I'm like, I'm all for open access. And then you have folks like the Internet Archive who are all about knowledge for the entire world. And the reality is there are questions as to the appropriateness, the legality. I tend to think it actually is more legal than the lawsuits are claiming. And I'm not going to talk about defenses or whatever. That's between different groups and their lawyers. But when you see folks go, you know, we have to take them down because there's this established way of doing business that shouldn't be circumvented, whether it's by libraries or whether it's by having to hold internet providers liable for the conversation. I mean, these are big questions. Is Zoom liable for the conversation we're having now? Should it be? If someone comes on and plays music, is that a problem? We at our conference, ironically, someone showed off a technology that did something very interesting to a Beatles song. Got blocked on YouTube. We weren't trying to make any money by exploiting the Beatles track, but okay, now we're blocked. And there's just all of these different balances. And I think we have to be very careful to allow creativity and encourage the creation of art and be more about how compensation can appropriately flow than in trying to prevent digital bits from flow. So this is where we are now. Where does it go in the future? Do I believe in 20 years that if somebody wants to research the most up-to-date information on a health issue they're suffering, that it probably won't be sign up for this $2,500 subscription if you want to do that? Do I believe that the laws of the United States should be publicly available and not subject to copyright? Yes, you know, if I'm in a state and I'm supposed to abide by the laws or defend myself, I should have access to those laws.
Well,
And
certainly
whereas-
Eleanor Roosevelt agreed with you.
And whereas it's very important for people to play by the rules and for, people have the ability to monetize, there's also this incredible value that comes from the spread of human knowledge that, to me, like, outweighs. And it may have come from, I was in India and I watched the United States like threatening all these sanctions because they were producing a pharmaceutical for a couple dollars a pill instead of respecting the patents where it would be thousands of dollars a person. God bless IP rights, but God bless people's ability to be cured considering that the knowledge exists. So I wish we would just, through the diversity of views, be able to recognize all sides to it. A lot of times you come in with certain groups and it's just like, like Don Henley wrote the Bible. It's like, okay, well, you're fucking multi-millionaire, get a better suit. But anyway, sorry, that was rude. But it's just a new time and we've got to look at where it's going and how it can work for everybody. Or
So
how
where's
it's
it going?
going to work for everybody, because it is working.
Which streaming companies are working? Are any of them making money doing what they do?
Well, I don't actually know, but I would have to assume that both YouTube and Twitter and with the demand for streaming companies, and I don't want to go into anyone's individual business, but I have to assume Nugs.net and Maestro and I have to assume Netflix. I mean, I have to assume Amazon, Zoom. I mean, Blue Jeans.
Netflix definitely profitable.
I don't know. I'm not privy to that. But honestly, if you look at Amazon, the fact that Zoom now has a $60 billion valuation, I don't know that profitability is even relevant at this point.
They're grossing.
Look, some people listening to this might think you have no regard for musicians or their output or their work. And yet, I know for a fact you were a founder of the Future of Music Coalition that
Right.
represents musicians in these issues. And I'd like you to speak to that. What moved you to create a coalition on behalf of musicians
Sure.
in the nation's capital where it would advocate their interests and does to this day?
Sure. So the reality is that music is pure and visceral. And it's all about the connection between the creator of the music and the people who listen to the music. And it's something that the music industry has traditionally not done very well. And this was me coming up and watching in the 80s and 90s and watching, you have somebody who makes an album, or you have someone who wants to record and they get signed. So they're never going to have real, they're not going to be owners of their music. And then the copyright aggregators A&R it, and it's a couple $1 million and they spend it all on the recording. And then theoretically the artists get paid on the back end, but royalty payment is incredibly hard, as you can see by Shoshana, who's done lots of royalty payments. So and then there's a distributor, and then there's a retailer, and then there's someone who climbs under the racks to make sure all the records are up there, and then there's the person who buys it, who has less connection to Pink Floyd, who made the music, than you can almost even imagine, except that they're a fan. And now you can directly connect. You can hire a famous musician, whether through Jamcard or whatever, to connect and do a lesson. You have Richard Thompson in his bedroom. You have Melissa Etheridge every day streaming. So it's like the artists need to figure out how better to connect with their fans and how to make money off of it. And the reality is having all these folks in the middle, whether it's a record company or whether it's Apple taking their 35%, it's like eventually this will all be disintermediated. I hope and I believe. And it will be a change where folks like Twitch or Facebook are going, well, actually, we have zillions of users, so you're still going to want to, monetize it. But here, shut this. I don't want to watch.
Oh,
Shut
you're
the chat.
distracted by
Sorry.
the chat.
Just shut the chat. That's fine. So so where was I? We're in a new age where you can directly connect, and that to me is like, how can the artists get compensated for the direct connection, which has been the theme for the whole time, whether it started, and there was like CD Baby, and Derek was like, here's how we help you take web orders and drop ship. I mean, on to now, where everything from Stage It to, there's so many ways to make money now, and it's hard for an artist or for somebody who's like, I don't want to do any of the business stuff. I want to be a pure creative. I don't really want to, pay attention to it. But really, it's all been about how can you, as an individual performer, whether now through something like Patreon, how can you connect with your fans in a way where they can directly support, not like, I'm going to buy a single and that's $1.10 will get back to the artist will get their 3 cents. It's like, how can the whales support? It's like, if I have an artist I love and I support them, that's so much more than would have gone through the traditional ways. So as we move forward with finding ways for artists to be supported, as well as all of society, whether through a universal basic income or this stuff, which they're not calling anything like that, but I got a check. I assume most people are getting checks. Companies are lining up to get these loans that'll be forgiven, which comes back, and not to zag a little bit, but people want to know why the economy is so bad and the market keeps going up. And to me, it's that the dollar's actually dropping, and anything that has a fixed value, whether it's a company or whether it's a cryptocurrency or whether it's a revenue stream, these are the things that are going to hold the value. And while they're printing more and more dollars, hold some fixed assets. Revenue streams are great. If you can be getting your ASCAP BMI checks, if you could be getting your mailbox checks from anything. Shoshana did an album and spins off $1,000 a year for the last 10 years. It's like, what can you do now while everything is collapsing to either switch to one of these areas that's going to do well? You can hold some property, you can hold some, like you as an artist, if you create your intellectual property and then find ways to get paid for it, that's really the future for musicians, I think. And it's really holding your rights, so when these opportunities arise, it's not like, oh, well, there's some lawyer and he doesn't really have the time to do the deal. It's like, you can do a deal for $1,000. So that to me is like, how can you be smaller, to the ground, own your own rights, partner with people who are from your community, be supported by your community, and much less around how can we get everyone in the world to like Adele.
Brian, what's the role of cryptocurrency and others? We hear all manner of explanation that blockchain, cryptocurrency, you've made reference to it yourself, that all of these could step in and provide for direct payments for products to artists. And yet, before we go there, I just want to observe that in history, progress has been made in the opposite way. That when new media come along, we create a pool of money with a fair split. And so we look at broadcast mediums like radio, television, etc. Even the recent MMA's passage in the MLC led to a blanket license. And so in some ways, the arc appears the opposite of what you're suggesting, but I want you to explain your view of how we can be more granular and make these things more direct and make the case against the history of change in this area.
Well, it's a really interesting situation, and we are really at a nascent part in the development, and people be like, I've been hearing about it for a decade. A decade is not that long, and I've been working on this since the 1990s, and I'm not going to go deep into the history. But the reality is that look back at all of the things in 2000 that were never going to happen with the internet, right? Like, this is never going to happen. Cosmo, what a stupid idea. You're going to go on the internet and people are going to bring you groceries? These were all things that seemed so far beyond what the infrastructure was ready for. So let's use the caveat that a lot of what people are talking about is still 10 years out. That said, for things like chain of title tracking, that's exactly what a blockchain is. There is no better way to track rights. If you've ever tried to straighten out, I don't want to refer to my wife, but she's been trying to straighten out George Clinton Parliament Funkadelics copyrights for the last 20 years. And to figure out either who legitimately had them and or what was registered, so who legally had them, it's like blockchain is a coin is issued and you watch its transfer the whole way. And you hear all these stories, some of which may be true, some maybe not. John Paris, rest in peace, always used to talk about, the guy who didn't like Guns N' Roses, so just made sure their check never went out, And when you have these situations where money can pass through automatically, it's only a matter of time before it does. And there's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of this, and there's a lot of that. And then you have some folks under the radar actually doing it in ways that aren't getting the attention, like Bruno Guez, who worked with Shoshana back 20 years ago at Quango, is now with Revelator. He doesn't even mention blockchain anymore. He's just about to get paid right away. Okay. Blockchain has so much mishigas around it and so many startups and so much money. And there was the whole ICO thing where people pulled out, tens or hundreds of millions in non-dilutive financing. And we can talk about what's real and what's a scam and this and that. That said, and I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin that will ever be made, and demand is increasing. And is it good for things? Yes, if you are in a country like China and you want to get your money out and there's no other way, it can circumvent governmental controls in ways that fiat and other government currencies can't necessarily. And it's interesting because it's programmable. So basically, it's beyond the control of anyone except possibly someone who could break it technically. And no one will know if that will happen until it does. So I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. There are problems with Bitcoin. So for instance, I'm seed investor, a company called Chia. You guys may remember Bram Cohen. I shouldn't really mention his name because he did BitTorrent, so people viscerally go, he must be evil. Go back to BitTorrent for a second. That was an interesting time because everyone's like, it's anonymous. And the reality is, so they could beat on the boogeyman. But the reality was, when people are getting a file over BitTorrent, it reveals where you're getting it from. It points to the infringers. It puts a big sign on their forehead. So the fact that everybody was like, it's anonymous, so we need to restrict the use of technology, was very important to go, it's actually totally identifies them, and you have a sniper rifle, you can shoot at that person, whereas, don't try to shut down the internet, go after the bad actors. So where were we? Okay, so things with Chia, for instance, there were a lot of things with Bitcoin that don't work so well. Like if someone steals it, it's gone. There's no real way to lock it up. Do you hold your private key or put it on a public exchange like Mt. Gox, which might get hacked? So things with Chia, for instance, there's a much better programming language. So you could say things like, only let a small amount out of my wallet every day. We need 2 people to sign off. We can only transfer it to each of these 2 wallets. So the reality is, over time, there will be more than Bitcoin. On the underside, we had a startup, No Black Box, that failed about 8 years ago. And the whole concept was, there shouldn't be a black box. Why should it all go into a box and then the smaller artists can't figure out how to get their money, so it gets redistributed to the large folks? And it's really easy for money to pass through. So whereas not right now, I believe in 20 years, when someone goes to Bandcamp and buys a $1 track, that there's no reason all the artists shouldn't get compensated immediately. Does that mean you should go fund all the companies working on it now? No, but do I see it self-evident that over time artists will opt into being paid directly and immediately? I have to believe that. And I look like things like Jam Card, which is taking back, and I'm an investor, taking back the industry for musicians. I believe that's going to be the future. And I look at these other cryptocurrencies. I'm going to mention one I'm advising. And will it be successful? I have no idea. But it's Streamer, and they're building data unions. And what they do is they let you track your internet usage, whether it's Google searches, and it's really creepy when you realize what people info they get. But you should control it. And then they track your info, they anonymize it, they aggregate it, and then they sell it to marketers. So you actually figure out what the market is for your data, as opposed to I provide it all to Facebook and let them monetize it. So it's not a golden arrow. It's not going to solve everything. Garbage in, garbage out. Some of the biggest problems I see are, I think it should be all open, because that's what's more valuable, when people have the ability to actually see the flow of information around payments. Whereas so many, if I hear one more time, but if you have 10% of a Beyonce song and people know you're rich, they're going to kidnap your grandkid. Okay, fair. I get that position, but things are changing now. I mean, I don't know we're ever going to have stores back on Rodeo Drive that are putting tons of fancy jewelry in the window anymore. That may be gone. It may come back, but it may be, yes, but business is down, so everything's more important. I think everything's different, and this flow of data which exchanges value, which is known as cryptocurrencies, is part of the future. And if you want to look, there was a book we helped edit back in the 1990s called Future of Money by my buddy Bernard Lietaer, who's a Belgian central banker who designed the euro. He recently passed. But he's very much about how do you create value, is you kind of agree that there's a creation of value, and then you can track it and exchange it. I'm much more about what I've come up with is non-quantifiable exchanges. If I do an event and thousands of people come out better off, all this value is created. And maybe I need the cash, or maybe I should get compensated, but it's like Schrodinger's cat. People are like, why don't you take a percentage of the deals that happen at your show? And I'm like, well, I can measure all the deals that happen at my show and try to take a percentage, and then not many will happen. Or I could just be like, everybody benefit, and then everybody comes out better. And then hopefully maybe you'll sponsor me, or you'll this, or you're that. But you just gotta build value.
Well, garbage in, garbage out. You got to take out the garbage 20 years from now. Of course, that's going to be happening. There are middlemen who are going to disappear along the way.
Right.
They're going to be obviously either replaced or not.
Right.
If we look at a smart contract, for example, which is a feature of blockchain technology, clearly they do not negotiate themselves, and neither do they enforce themselves. And so someone's going to have to do this work of taking out the garbage. What do you think changes over this 20-year arc, and who should be scurrying for the exits right now and finding another way to make a living?
Well, I mean, instead of saying what you should be scurrying against, let's talk about what you should be scurrying towards. I'm seeing Zoom room monitors and facilitators. There being more demand for people who can run good virtual meetings than.
So Tom and I are safe, you're saying?
You guys are in good shape.
Thank God.
And anyone who can still get people together around the things that are accelerating. The traditional industries that have had problems, it's like, I mean, I wouldn't bet on cruise companies. I wouldn't bet on airlines, Boeing, oh my God. Yes, I'm long Tesla because of their battery technologies and all that. Most other manufacturing is tough. God bless the manufacturers like Apple, but I have no idea how they're going to negotiate this China issue, which is another huge thing, because I'm seeing a two-track thing where companies have to decide we ignore China or we cater to China, and you're having a problem with folks like Zoom who are like, well, if we're in China, we're subject to Chinese law, and some people having a purity test, well, then screw them, and others going, well, do you want to bifurcate, or do you want to have it work? There's a ticketing company just an online event company, I forget what it's called, but they're like very much like, and we'll work with China. And those who don't intentionally do it can't. So what were we talking about? Sorry.
Well, you're giving me a 20-year arc, and you're asking the good questions about where the value will be and where we should go if we still need value to sustain ourselves, if we're not on Social Security just drawing a check. And I think you've given a pretty good sense of direction around that. I think that's very helpful. You know, Robert Singerman asked a good question in the chat,
Right.
About where things are headed, and a fairly pessimistic look at what's going on right now. And of course, that's an accurate look. And
Sure.
you can count on Robert Singerman for that, because he's an astute observer.
He's a realist.
And we're very lucky that he attends these sorts of things, and that
Yes.
he's involved so extensively as he is throughout
Great
the music
guy, great
economy.
guy. So,
But I think we're all wondering, you know, where does the value go and how does it change? I mean, look, I look back at the 1920s. I'm curious about what happened when acoustic became electric, because I think it points to what happens as electric becomes digital. You've got a big transition that happens.
Mm-hmm.
In an acoustic world, artists controlled their art with their feet. If they
Right.
weren't in the room, you couldn't see them or hear them. Along came electricity and loudspeaker systems and radio broadcast and television broadcast and all manner of monetization connected with that. And so I'm confident we can make this transition into the future if we stand on the shoulders of giants and look back at how we dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm less certain that we know what we're doing today without those reference points.
Right. Well, I mean, so when you look at the market, because that was the start of that thing, it's like, I don't try to time the market, and, you know, and it's gone up, what, 50% since the economy got destroyed a couple months ago. So that's a whole other question. And the reality is, I both think we're going to get a 40% plus decline from whatever the high is, and I'm looking forward to it, because these companies, whether it's Tesla or Square or Stripe, Stripe's private, these are all buying opportunities when it goes down. But really what we're all about, and I don't think we're going to be honored enough to get Shoshana to come on, but it's really an attention society. And it's really all about how people pay. Do you want to come on? Come on.
Well, because we were talking about it, like where the value is going to be and like what the most valuable thing is. And I think regardless of the platform, the things that are going to be the most valuable are the things that are getting the attention. And if you're able to get attention, and whoever gets the most amount of attention, we don't know who it's going to be, and are able to get that amount of attention and have it be frictionless without middlemen in between, or music industry pimps, or whatever the other people are that try to go inside and then control that direct connection. So number one is getting attention, and number two, it's creating opportunities for people not to be spectators, because people want to pay attention, and then people also want to contribute. And so anything where people are able to contribute to the platform and actually be able to not be a spectator, but actually be like a part of the discourse, and then also whatever you're able to do to get people's attention, because you can have the best product in the world, but if people aren't paying attention to you, you're not valuable. And if you could be a 20-second TikTok, but you got 20 million people looking at you, that's going to be the valuable thing. You don't know where it is and what it's going to be, but the things that get that attention, that's really what's going to be the most valuable thing right now. Not who has the most goods, who has the most services, the best services. It's who gets that attention. That's the currency in the current economy, I think.
That word pimps, is that a legal term of art?
Well, I mean, it's just.
Or is that an observation from a lawyer of law?
It's from Frank Zappa, actually, Tinseltown Rebellion, from the Pimps Who Skim the Cream. So yes.
You know, I have to say, from a retrospective standpoint, drag her back on screen, will you, for a second?
That's what
you know, look, you guys have been an amazing couple for a lot of years. And I just want to say, you know, hats off for that kind of teamwork over that period of time. It's not easy. It's hard. Things go up, they go down. But, you know, you guys have done amazing things for decades. And I just want to recognize that. I just want to say the Zisk family has been one of the pillars, one of the foundations of this change in the business. And you can be very, very proud of that. And so I'm thankful to both of you, especially thankful that you've devoted this hour to us. I mean, without Shoshana, the microphone would have been gone halfway through. I mean,
Yes.
there's no doubt about that. But we're really privileged, and I say that on behalf of the audience as well, that having the two of you here is a terrific thing. And we couldn't be more blessed to have two keen observers of the music world and the media world than yourselves. So hats off to you. Thanks for making it great over all this time. And you know, you've been on the run the whole time. God knows process servers must be chasing. Because, my God, what is it? San Francisco?
Never
Hawaii,
been sued.
Miami,
Never
Portland.
been sued. And I don't recommend it. I do not recommend it.
Well, you've done amazing work, and I just want to say thank you so much. I know this. We have not had a Who Knew with more questions from the audience that were extremely high quality. And I wish we had time for them all, but I do have to stop this before we hit the magic 3 o'clock hour.
I haven't been watching the questions. I look forward to it. And anyone who wants, you can reach me, brianzisk@gmail.com. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
How do they get Shoshana?
Just
contact
don't.
the local bar association or something?
I don't know. Facebook, LinkedIn. I generally.
LinkedIn.
Yeah,
LinkedIn's a
the
good way. She's been beaten
Okay,
up
no
for LinkedIn.
email, right? That's
No
too-
email. No
That's
email.
too reptilian. That's too
I want less email. I'm unsubscribing from everything. If I unsubscribe from your things, probably won't unsubscribe from Who Knew, but everything else I'm unsubscribing for. Email is going to be dead. We're going to have much more. I mean, you want to bet long, that Apple and their eyeglasses that they're going to, when everybody starts having, you know, digital stuff piped to their glasses, within the next year or 3, that will change everything. Email, most people who send me emails, I'll be polite, but really I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Well, this is very sad because, you know, the fall list is lowest common denominator for 25 years. And I always loved the idea that it was email because, you know, you could read it on an Xbox, for Christ's sakes, you know. It really doesn't matter. You could get it no matter how you did it. But I mean, I'll concede you're right.
I haven't
Downward
unsubscribed.
TV,
I unsubscribed for a decade, but I'm back on now and I read it and it's interesting.
Don't worry
The same
about that
characters.
decade. Tom missed the decade. He says we're 15 years old on fall. We're 25.
Seriously. Yep.
So I'm going to take Jim freezing.
So for everyone, there's a loss. Tom's out.
Jim, you're out. You just froze on me. But folks, I'm going to take the microphone now and thank Brian and Shoshana. Thank you to Jim Griffin, and thank you to the audience. We're going to keep doing these. I'm going to keep doing these from select rooms. I want to thank Tennessee Brew Works for allowing me to come in here today. This is a fantastic beer and a great meal and one of my favorite places. Next week, we're going to be doing this, and sitting where Brian is sitting is truly one of the smartest people I've ever met, let alone in any room, and that is Mr. Burtis Downs, REM's lawyer and manager. No telling.
You're known by your company. What an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Those of you who don't know him, you know.
So details on that will be coming out soon. And again, thank you to everyone. Be safe, be kind, and vote your ass off on November 3rd. Thank you, folks.
Be well. Thank you so much.